Hello and welcome. This is the Golders AFL podcast with me, Harry, and Caleb up here. Thank you so much for joining us. This is round 2 of the AFL. It is so good to have football back. It really does feel like the seasons are turning and we're getting into a nice routine with an almost full slate of games. So there's a lot to talk about, but let's get into it. Caleb, how are you going, mate?
Yeah, good. I was going to say, happy that the Lions got the win over the weekend.
Of course.
With their flag unfurling. And a few interesting results over the weekend that I can't wait to get straight into because it's definitely going to have a sharp reflection on how this table unfolds at the end of the season, I feel like.
It definitely is early on in the season, obviously. It's still only, 3 rounds in. It's technically still round 2. We've got round 3 coming up and... I love the Thursday games being so close. We just basically have to wait 2 more days, and then we've got football. So you're kind of in that weekly cycle, which is, some people can get a little bit reactionary about. They're like, oh,
100%.
This team's terrible when it's been 2 games. So we'll try not to fall into that trap, but there are some signs that I think we're seeing that teams are definitely going to be either falling off or very good for the year. So we'll start with a team that has had some expectations, but definitely has not lived up to those expectations so far, which is the Carlton Blues versus the team that a lot of people predicted would be, one of the premiership contenders this year, was the Hawthorn Hawks. So Hawks winning by 20 points there. Clearly, if you look at the timeline here, the Hawks kind of kicked away in that third and fourth quarter. The Blues actually had a decent lead around the second quarter, around halftime, but the Hawks, too good in the end. They are looking like the real deal. They are 3-0, sitting on top of the ladder. Hawks fan, there's not really much else to say about this. Carlton fans are obviously livid about starting 0-2. They're looking at, they've got Brownlow medalists, they got Coleman medalists, they've got All-Australian backs, and they still can't beat these teams that they think they should be beating, even though Hawthorn are a very good team. So that was kind of my take on it. How did you see this game on Thursday night?
No, I echo a lot of your sentiments. It was a fun watch. I enjoyed a lot of the football that Hawthorn showed off. Carlton are one of those teams where, like you said, they should be performing a lot better given the players that are at Michael Voss's disposal.
Mm-hmm.
But if we want to just bring up that graphic of the score timeline again, it was pretty even for a lot of the first half. It wasn't really until the second half kicked off where Hawthorn started to get more and more pressure on the scoreboard and eventually got up to a 20-point lead and ended up winning it comfortably. So the Hawthorn Hawks definitely have a lot to be happy about. I feel their pressure on the football and the players that they've got in their forward line, like Chol, he's a great target man to get balls up high and him to take those contested marks. And then they've got so many exciting, crummers that can get in there as well and contribute on the scoreboard.
Yeah.
So I like a lot of what the Hawks are doing so far. I think Carlton, it's still too early to tell if they're going to have a bad season or not. I was going to say last year with the Lions going very poor in their opening patch to then go on to win a premiership, to me, is indicative of the fact that any team in the competition can still somehow pull off the ultimate prize. So I'm not willing to write them off, even though I did predict that they would be finishing comfortably in the top 4. But not a good start from the Blues, that's for sure.
That's definitely been the theme, I think, of the first 2 rounds, was that no matter what team you're playing, that there can be an upset. We saw with Richmond, we saw with perhaps the West Coast result. Obviously not West Coast winning, but being a pretty competitive, and then the other teams showing some good fight, even though not getting the win. Say, for example, Melbourne Demons. So there's definitely a lot of parity in the league. But Carlton fans, don't lose hope. You've played a very good team in Hawthorn there. So they do have the Bulldogs this week, which I can't for sure say they're going to win, but I think that the fans of Carlton should have a little bit more hope for that game, if you know what I'm talking about.
It's a lot more unpredictable, that upcoming fixture, I agree.
Yeah. Our next game, which we did see again at the MCG on Friday night, was the 100 years of Footscray. This was a great celebration with a whole bunch of legends, Bob Murphy, etc., playing in front of the record home crowd of the Western Bulldogs. Footscray Bulldogs, playing the Collingwood Magpies, who again played a home game that was actually, an away game that was more of a home game. That was a Freudian slip there, because again, they're getting to play an away game at their home venue, which, it is what it is, but Collingwood fans, appreciate that you have a bit of a bias in terms of the teams and the scheduling and the venues you play at.
It's all about the money and the tickets, mate.
Well, it's interesting because some of these teams that, have home stadiums at Marvel Stadium play their big games at the MCG. It's just kind of the way it is when you want to be selling a lot of tickets. And obviously they sold there was like a 73,000 people in attendance. So obviously you're going to have that at the MCG. But then, if anyone from Collingwood turns around and says, "Oh, we don't get any sort of preferential treatment," just look at the umpiring on this game. This might be a talking point. 33-14 was the free kick count, and I think Collingwood winning this close game, they pretty much just won it on vibes, and a lot of people would say biased umpiring, I feel like. Bulldogs were up for it, but didn't quite get the win in the end.
The fact that the game was this close, I think, is indicative of both these sides. Mm-hmm. I think Collingwood is going to still perform better over the long term this season compared to the Doggies. The other interesting statistic that I heard after the game, which I found quite eerie, was the last time Footscray and Collingwood versed each other. And I say Footscray when they had that name back in the AFL. The last time these two teams faced off, Collingwood did win by 6 points as well.
Wow.
So to have this, big monumental celebration of the club's history and then to repeat a result like that is kind of spooky.
Interesting.
But yeah, it's just one of those things that you mark into the history books and think, well, if you're a Collingwood fan, you're happy that you got the W. And if you're a Doggies fan, to celebrate a big day like that and not come away with the 4 points is a bit disappointing. But I wouldn't be catastrophizing if I was a Dogs fan.
Okay. Yeah, I can feel like they can draw a little bit of positives from this, but again, they do have a lot of players out of this game. They still have Bontempelli missing. They still have Cody Waitman missing. So Liam Jones, still a lot of their star players missing. But again, Collingwood, just a little bit too much class in this game, even though they were helped a lot by umpires. And, playing at their home venue, all of that sort of stuff. I won't go too much into my Collingwood hate. The bias is showing at this point. But we'll move on to our next game, which was, again, at the MCG, an early day game on Saturday, was the Essendon Bombers versus the Adelaide Crows. Man, this game was... are the Crows for real? People are going to be looking at them now and having a little bit of expectation and seeing the way that some of their players are performing, especially their forwards and their goal kicking. They have played the Saints and the Bombers, who are not exactly, cream of the crop when it comes to the competition, but you still got to beat them, and they're putting up a lot of scores. I think they scored like 43 goals in 2 games, which is,
it's a very good start.
Very good number. So no, definitely. If you look at the worm that we put up here, it's pretty much it was Adelaide the entire day. Essendon fans had a little tiny glimmer of hope, but then they just kicked away just before halftime and then just continued on. Did you see that funny moment with Sam Draper taking a set shot, and instead of kicking it like a normal person, he decided to, from 10 meters in front, check side it around the body, and I was like,
yeah. I was gobsmacked watching this game, seeing him do that.
Yeah.
To be honest, I'm always of the opinion in sport, it doesn't really matter how you get the job done as long as you get the job done. But the audible gasp around the stadium when he did that, and then continued to do it throughout the game. He had 3 or 4 set shots, I think, and they all went in with the check side. But I'm not a fan of it, to be honest, since it's come into the game. I think that to show off that you don't have confidence with your drop punt is severely worrying, especially if you're a key forward. That's your job. But the goals went in. So you just sort of have to respect it and be like, all right, that's your technique. It is what it is.
Yeah.
I don't personally like it, but the overall team performance is where the question marks have to be raised with the Bombers. I know a lot of people in the media are already, starting to throw fuel on the fire, so to speak. But I want to throw this into the conversation and hear your opinion on this, Harry. The fact that the score was 161 to 100. This was an absolute goals fest. So from a neutral watching it, I loved it. It was great entertainment. But the Bombers still scored 100 points.
Yeah.
The Crows might have been good, but are they actually that good? Because they conceded a lot of goals.
Yeah.
So they might have some exciting play through the midfield and into the forward line and be able to get it through the big sticks. But have they got enough defensively to be a challenger?
I don't think we're going to know that until we, actually see them play a team, that we consider to be a contender. I don't think that we're going to be able to justify, I think it's only 2 games, trying not to be too reactionary. But I think that 100 points against Essendon is not a terrible result. I think that Essendon still have a lot of firepower, especially with their midfielders like Zach Merritt, who you love. Jai Caldwell was great in this game as well. I just think that their defense, yes, for the Crows needs to be a little bit more tight, but I'm not too worried about it. Are you?
I don't know. It's still too early for me, and I'm not as familiar with the Crows and what they've done in their off season and what their tactics are for the season moving forward. But I really appreciated a lot of their contested footy and their movement through the midfield.
Yeah.
And the aim of the game is you've got to be clinical when you get your opportunities, and they definitely did that. It's always made easy when you're coming up against a side that is defensively pretty poor, and the Bombers have one of the worst defenses in the competition. Not only after the first couple games of this season, but historically and since Brad Scott has come into the job. So it's a real head scratcher, this one. I can't figure out the Bombers because they've got talent. Like, I can see a team that could do well, but they just are so poor. And the Crows really, really put a number. They put their neck, what's the expression? They put the neck in the guillotine and they really chopped them off. So the Bombers are, in trouble.
And are you going to want to retract your preseason prediction where you put them up in the top 5?
Well, this is what I was talking about earlier. I foreshadowed this, but there's going to be a few results in these early days that'll make you question a lot of your predictions early on in the season. This is why I hate doing predictions, but no, look, the Bombers could still turn it around, but it's not looking good.
They have a Thursday night game next week against Port, which will be another good test of both of these teams. The Crows next week have North Melbourne on a Sunday Arvo game, which is actually going to be a pretty good game. We'll get to North in a little bit, but we'll move on to our next game of the week, which was the Port Adelaide Power smashing the hapless Richmond Tigers 140 to 68. Man, this is what we thought the Tigers were going to be, and Carlton fans are probably thinking, "Are you serious? We lost to this." Port Adelaide absolutely thrashed them at home. Connor Rosie was absolutely awesome, the skipper of the Power. He was their number 1 player all over the field. Tigers, a little bit of regression. I mean, it's kind of to be expected, that emotional win, playing away from home, all these young players. I don't think the Richmond fans will be like, we got another game into our young players, that's fine. But for Port, it's like, yes, good, you beat this team by this much, probably should have beaten them by more. That's what they'd be thinking if you're a Port fan. What were you thinking if you watched this game?
I watched the first quarter and then I changed it off. I was not surprised that Port Adelaide showed up to play, but the Tigers coming into this game had to show to the AFL footy community that last week against the Blues wasn't a fluke.
Yeah.
And I think that has been proved that it was. I think they just were all up for it last week and they got the job done.
Yeah.
But to go away from home and not be able to put up a comprehensive 4-quarter performance is, it's what you expected from the Tigers, and I'm sure there'll be plenty more of that this season. But Port Adelaide, they're one of those teams that, I think they'll have a tough season. They're going to have some highs. They're going to have some lows. the biggest takeaway for me from this game was I saw the AFL post on their social medias that Pepper goal from the boundary line.
Oh, yeah.
Goal of the season contender early on in the season, which was so that was awesome. That was a great goal to witness. But yeah, I was to say the result itself isn't that surprising.
Yeah, I think that it's a notch in the bedpost, so to speak, for the Power. They're like, yep, got this done. Move on. Short week this week against Essendon, so it's going to be that one's going to be a great game on Thursday night. Definitely be wanting to see that one. Our next game, which was one of the more surprising results, was St Kilda versus Geelong, and
I was shocked with this one.
Geelong were a bit flat at the start. You know, they lost. They were. I'll look at the worm here. They were up by 41 points. Were the St Kilda Saints, and man. Towards the 9-minute mark of the third quarter, they were like 35 points ahead, and everyone was like, okay, they've easily got this. And then Geelong just started to chip away, come back. And I think that there was a goal shot at the end of the about 5 minutes left in the game, and it would have put them up by it would have reduced the margin, to like 3 points. But Wangadeen Miller for the Saints just got his toe onto it, and man, that was almost a game-saving intervention there, because man, the Cats were coming so hard there. Home at Marvel Stadium for the Saints it's not exactly a fortress, but they do play very well there. And but I think Geelong will just kind of push this one aside and be like, yeah, whatever. Early season. They're one of those teams, I don't know if you feel this, but their losses, especially early in the season, they even had a couple really bad games last year. And they were just like, nah, it's okay. We'll figure it out, you know?
Yeah, no, I get what you're saying. I was definitely not expecting this at all. I was expecting the Cats to roll over the Saints because they were very, very poor last week. And
me too, yeah.
A lot of people thought that the wheels could be coming off at St Kilda. A lot of people were questioning Ross Lyon. But he somehow got the best out of his players in this game, and Geelong just didn't show up.
Yeah.
And if they're going to be top of the table, which a lot of people predicted, like, you can't be losing these sort of games to teams that are going to be finishing outside the 8 come the end of the season.
I just think that, Geelong just didn't have enough effort, especially at the start of the game. So I just think that they'll push through. They'll be okay. But yeah, great signs for the Saints. I think that this is not going to be a sign that they're going to make the 8. I don't think the Saints are. And I don't think this is a sign that Geelong are going to drop out of the 8. I think that it's just one of those results that both teams can learn from in positive and negative ways, and just kind of, go on throughout the season. But yeah, it was a great game.
But this is why we love footy, though, because we do get these results throughout the season that are like, whoa, didn't see that coming. So to me, that is exciting, that we can still get these results all the way through.
And like we said before, it's like every game, it feels, has, the possibility of being a close game. We're not quite at the point of the season where there's a certainty to some games. Like, towards the end of the year, there was a certainty because we knew what teams were, and now we don't quite know exactly what every team is. Even, just look, we're going to keep pointing back to the Carlton-Richmond game for an upset. And this game for another upset, not quite as surprising as that one, but still an upset. So this was, I think, the best game of the round. Very, very exciting. Shout out to Jack McRae, 40-plus disposals coming in from, when he was basically let go by the Bulldogs, and he's been one of their standout players for the Saints. No Bailey Smith in this one for the Cats. They had a couple of other players go off. We had Tom Stewart go off with injury, so we'll see how he goes throughout the rest of the week leading up into this week. I don't know if he's been ruled out yet, but yeah, definitely some worrying signs for the Cats, but I think, again, they'll take it in their stride. They'll be better for it.
And Connor O'Sullivan got the Rising Star nomination, so they've definitely got some young players at their disposal that are stepping up in key moments and potential for the future.
Yeah, definitely. That was our Saturday slate, so we move on to the early Sunday morning, especially for us, being at the game at 6 a.m. for me, pretty early as well for you. Heading down to the Gabba, it was raining pretty hard in the morning, and then it started raining, and then suddenly the sun just came out. So definitely it cleared up before the Premiership Cup ceremony, which was pretty good. I was glad that didn't get spoiled again by rain. The unfurl, the legends coming out. My hot take, I don't know if this is a hot take, but I was actually glad that they did it this game. I think that it would have felt weird doing it on the game that was rescheduled in round 3. Yeah. I just think that if we would have been dwelling a little bit too much on last year, obviously we want to celebrate last year, but it would have been the 3rd game of the season for us, and it's like, can we just move on to the next? I know the players want to, the coach obviously is focused on the next game, so I wasn't mad about doing it in the day. It's just, it would have been cool to see it with a light show, but it is what it is when it comes to a Premiership celebration. What was your thoughts on that?
No, I concur. It's one of those things, the fact that opening round got washed out with a cyclone, it's just, you can't predict these sort of things. No. But yeah, the fact that the Lions were able to pivot and rearrange their show and do it on this day was interesting, because coming up against the Eagles, who are one of the worst teams in the competition, and we're doing a whole Premiership flag unfurling. Yeah. It's like rocking up to a party with your friends who are at uni, and everyone doesn't really have a car, but you've just rolled in with your Lamborghini or your Ferrari, and it's just like, look how good this is, and then everyone else doesn't have a car that compares. That's what it kind of felt like with the Lions, just showing it off in front of the Eagles. But it was certainly exciting to sort of witness that with a sold out Gabba crowd, get to celebrate those moments, and becoming ravished with the emotions. But yeah, the Eagles came out in the first quarter, I think surprised everyone. Would you agree?
For sure. It looked like for a second there that we'd lost the keys to the Lamborghini, because the Lions had basically no ascendancy throughout the entirety of the first 2 quarters, and they kicked out to like a 30-point lead, as you can see down there on the worm. And at halftime, I think it was 24 points. Man, it was a bit odd. There was an odd feeling going around, and third quarter was definitely the Lions' quarter, and they pushed away, and it kind of had an air of inevitability about it. Just the sloppiness, I think, of the Lions was a little bit frustrating. A little bit of the handball chains being sloppy, but I'm not really going to fault them too much. Again, bit of a premiership hangover, bit of a what is this team? Where are the goals coming from? I mean, we still scored 14 goals, but Logan Morris kicked a few. Still no Charlie Cameron. Zach Bailey had a couple. There was a couple of bright spots from the debutant of Will McLaughlin, who had 2 goals. So there was definitely some bright spots for the Lions. But I said this to you, that it's funny that we've played worse so far this year, and then we've won the first 2 games. And last year we didn't actually play that bad, and we lost the first 3. So it's like swings and roundabouts, and AFL is decided by such small margins sometimes. And Lachie Neale hasn't had the best start to his season and all that sort of stuff. Don't really have a major goal kicker, but I was glad that they gritted it out and had another good win, because in the end, a win is a win. What was your final thoughts on this game?
Well, I was going to say the fact that, Lachie Neale and Harris Andrews, the 2 captains for this team, were able to steer us back into the positive forward play and get those goals on the board. I think it's important for our older players to step up and, lead the team in that fashion. Neale got plenty of disposals, and Andrews got plenty of, spoils and intercepts that he is so good at. Mm-hmm. The last thing I'll say is I was pleasantly surprised by Logan Morris. I was going to say, I had a lot of I wasn't exactly convinced that he was going to be the answer to our forward line problems. Yeah. And I saw a lot of promise from this game with him, getting up high, getting those contested marks, and scoring some goals from some pretty tough angles. Yeah. So I think the testament of any good team is when you are not playing your best footy, can you still get the win? And the Lions did that. Yeah. The last thing I suppose we can maybe throw out there is the whole Harley Reid situation. I know the media have having a field day with this, but I loved that clip that was circulating on social media where he like gives the finger to the crowd, and then the Lions fan comes over, is like offers him some tissues.
Yeah,
oh, it was so good. So I love all that theater in sport because it is an entertainment business, but I don't know, the media tends to take these things in the wrong way sometimes.
He is developing a bit of a reputation as being a bit of a flopper and a milker. He gave away, I think it was 7 free kicks. Like, he was holding the ball a couple times and just not being disciplined, looking a little bit out of shape. Not exactly the signs you want to be giving off when you're trying to get multi-million-dollar contracts. I just think, I mean, he's a young guy in a big grown man's body, and I think that he's got to mature up a little bit. So I just think that his play is obviously mercurial. It's very, very strong, but temperament, decision making, still obviously is just of a very young player. But if you're an Eagles fan, that's who you're looking for to be your star, and hopefully they can hold on to him, because there's a lot of conjecture on whether or not he's actually going to stay as an Eagle. So we'll see.
Absolutely.
We'll see about that one. But yeah, definitely excited that the Lions won. Happy that you've got the 4 points, but not happy about kind of the entirety of the game. But we'll move on to next week against the Cats. We'll talk about that in a little bit. But the last 2 games of the Sunday was a somewhat surprising, not quite to me. I thought North were going to be very strong, but they defeated Melbourne here 125-66. Melbourne, who I predicted would be, I think they were like third last in my ladder predictor, and they look like they deserve to be there because they were pretty bad, especially post halftime. As you can see, North just completely kicked away towards the end of the third quarter there and just completely dominated the rest of the game. Melbourne, kept it tight through a bit of the game, but man, I don't know what you're going to be thinking about if you're a Melbourne supporter, because you still had, obviously they didn't have Stephen May, but they had Clayton Oliver, they had Petrarca, obviously older guys now, Jake Lever, all these major stars, but just couldn't get it done. What were your thoughts on this game, Caleb?
Well, it's again similar to the Tigers. The fact that they got a victory last season and now North have got their first win on the board definitely throws a bit of questions into who's actually going to get the wooden spoon this season, because a lot of people predicted them to be the worst of the comp. But victories are so very important, especially when you're towards the bottom end. And the result itself is not surprising at all. I've anticipated everything that I've seen from Melbourne so far. I think it's going to continue to get far worse for them. But yeah, the game itself, I'm not sure if it's a reflection of how far along in their development North Melbourne have come and how good that they could potentially be. Or is it to the fact that Melbourne are just that bad? I think it's a bit of both. That badly in the fourth quarter is very worrying.
I think it's a bit of both. I think that North just kind of hit a wave and they got a bit of momentum, but also, I just think the players from Melbourne are a bit older. Max Gawn, as the players I said before, they're just a bit older, and I think that this young, hungry, determined Kangaroos team just looked a little bit more classy. And I think the pickups of Jack Darling, who was playing his 300th game, Luke Parker looked really good as well. So they've recruited
Caleb Daniel's such a good nifty recruit for them.
Yeah, all these good players. And Tristan Sherry, I think, showing that he's the best ruckman in the competition right now, having a great
He's a formidable bloke with that black headgear as well.
Yeah,
I wouldn't want to get onto the field with him. Jesus.
Yeah, he's definitely a menace out there, and he's come up against, for his first 2 games, against some 2 very, very good ruckmen, and he's definitely shown that he's worthy of being up in that conversation. So enjoying seeing this from North. Alistair Clarkson looks like he's getting the boys onto a good track here, so we'll see where they head for the rest of the season, but good signs for North. We'll move on to our last game, which was, some people would say, the game of the round. The Dockers losing by 3 points, a late goal by Joel Amartey, giving Sydney the win. And as you can see, it was back and forth. Dockers had a good little lead, and then Swans came back. Dockers came back, and then Swans right at the end. It doesn't matter when you have the lead. It doesn't matter how big your lead is. It matters when you have your lead. And as you can see, Sydney had the lead just at the right time. And the Swans avoid an 0-3 start. They are now 1-2, and the Dockers are now 0-2, and I saw we'll look at the ladder a bit, but spoiler alert, the last two teams are both from Perth, so not a great week or a couple of weeks for WA football. But yeah, Freo, Flag, Mantle, all of that. I still think they're going to make the 8. I just don't think that they're going to have really any shot of winning a premiership or being in the top 2 or 4, especially when you lose your first 2 games. That's really, really tough. So I know you watched this game, Caleb. What was your overall takeaway?
Well, this is the thing that I don't quite understand, because so many people in pre-season in the footy punditry world were really hyping up the Dockers, like saying they've got such a good list. Their team back to front is so formidable. And I've just been so underwhelmed by what I've seen so far. And again, early days, I'm not willing to make a concrete opinion on the Dockers yet. Yeah. But yeah, I thought they'd be coming out doing a lot better. And apparently the team that fielded against the Swans was one of the youngest in the competition. So I don't know if that comes into it at all in terms of inexperience and whatnot. But I don't know. I agree with the verdict that this was the game of the round, because both these teams are fighting for the same type of position on the table, getting into the 8 and finishing hopefully in the top 4. That's what both of these clubs are striving for. So when I was watching the game and the commentary picked up on this, they definitely identified the fact that it was very cagey, it was very risk averse. There was lots of kick to kick and, just holding possession. And when it got to that fourth quarter, the Swans, like you said earlier, just were able to claw themselves back enough to pick up, enough points to get themselves into a winning position. And it was a thrilling end to the game as well, with a potential mark before the siren, but it was touched and the game was over and done for the Dockers. So the Swans get an important victory away from home, which is, crucial for Dean Cox, but yeah, I'm not quite sure what to make of Fremantle as of yet.
Again, I think that they've played a good team here in the Swans. I think they held their own. The Swans are, they're going to be up there. I just think that Freo could make the finals, like I said before, but I don't think they're going to be going anywhere near the top 4 or 2. Could be proven wrong, but I just don't see it with this team. They just don't have... they have goal scorers, but they're just not scoring as much as they should. And I think that they have an elite midfield. They have a good defense. It's just where are the goals coming from? So it's kind of like the reverse of Adelaide, if you know what I mean. They have this, although Adelaide have obviously played a couple different lower ranked teams. But yeah, it's definitely going to be... it's a hard start, especially after getting thrashed by Geelong and now losing in a close game to Sydney. 2 good teams. We'll see what happens when they play. It's actually the Eagles they're playing next week. It's the West Coast Derby, so it's going to be a fun game, that one.
Sold out crowd, hopefully.
Yeah, I think so. So it's going to be interesting. We're going to have a little look at the ladder from this point. So we're 3, I guess, let's just call it 3 rounds in, even though it's round 2. So Hawthorn obviously have played the most games. They've played 3 games and they've won all 3. They have a very healthy percentage, and they are playing the GWS Giants next week. That's going to be an awesome game. Super excited about seeing that one. So we've also got the Adelaide Crows there, sitting there on second. 8 points clusters the Giants, Collingwood, the Lions, all in pretty good standing. You've got a huge game next week between Carlton and Collingwood. Collingwood have a bye next week, but then their next game is against Carlton. The Swans and Collingwood both have a bye next week. Suns coming back. You got Geelong as well, North Melbourne, all on 4 points. North Melbourne in the top. Any thoughts for you, Caleb, on those seedings there for the top 8, 3 rounds in?
This is what I hate about what the AFL has done with their opening to the season, is the fact that everyone's played different games. It's such not a reflection of the true value of these teams. So this is something the league really needs to have a look at, because I think it's atrocious.
Yeah, Hawks have played 3 games after 3 rounds, and the Suns have played 1 game.
The Suns are still sitting on 1. It's just dumb.
I mean, they can't predict, obviously, a cyclone, but 1 game for 3 rounds, I think the Suns would be a bit frustrated by that. They'd probably be, having a really good preseason and be like, all right, let's get into it, boys. And then all of a sudden they're sitting here and everyone's been like, oh, well, cool, the season started and we've played 1 game for 3 rounds. So a little bit annoying there, but then we'll drop down a little bit lower. We've got the Western Bulldogs there in 9th. Swans, Port, St Kilda, Richmond, all with wins. Richmond, obviously very low on their percentage for 4 points, so they're probably going to drop down pretty far, especially... this will be a tough game, actually, though, against the Saints next week, but we will see. So you've got a bit of a cluster, obviously, around the 4.1 win mark. And then right down the bottom, you've got Carlton, Melbourne, Essendon, Freo, and West Coast all on 0 points with no wins from 2 games. Any of those teams that you are a bit surprised to be down there, or ones that you're like, oh, okay, yep, that makes sense?
Carlton and Fremantle, I'd say. I'm surprised that they're that low. Essendon being down there at this early stage is also a little bit of a surprise, but to most other people, I would assume not, maybe. Carlton and Fremantle, they've definitely got to pick their game up if they want to be finishing in top 8 football.
Yeah, I think if you're looking at that and you're seeing Hawthorn there, you're not surprised. But I think that, seeing Sydney, Freo, Carlton, those teams down there, it's definitely not where you want to be sitting, even though it is only 3 games in. But we'll have a look at some of our next round games, which we did speak about a little bit before in our wrap-ups. Essendon and Port, Thursday night football. Great game at Marvel Stadium. We've got Carlton and Western Bulldogs. If Carlton don't win this and they start 0-3, the knives will be coming out. You know what I mean? Like, they will definitely be coming out. It is going to be an interesting week. But the thing is, if they don't win, what exactly will happen? It's like one of those, do you fire your coach 3 games in, or do you just continue to let the slide happen, and then they get to round 10 and the season's over and they've lost 7 games out of 10? That's the sort of situation I foresee if they kind of let this game get away from them and let the season get away from them. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, I get what you're saying. I definitely think it's too early to making decisions on sackings and whatnot. So I think Vossi's safe for now.
I mean, you look at the sack Fagan bandwagon that was running around after like 10 rounds last year, and look how that ended up. So again, might be a little bit of Brisbane bias, but I think Vossi deserves a little bit more of a leash there. But again, we're not in the Victorian fan media space, and some people might be thinking a little bit differently and feel like he's had enough time. But again, we'll see after this game against Western Bulldogs. Melbourne and Gold Coast early Saturday morning. Gold Coast heading to the MCG, where they do not play very often at all. That is going to be a very interesting game. Gold Coast, this is one of those games, if you're legit, you should be winning this game.
And comfortably.
Yep. We've then got St Kilda and Richmond. We spoke about that a little bit. A little bit of a cellar dweller kind of game, but I think that Richmond won't... I don't know. They'll show a little bit of fight, but I think the Saints will actually get the W for this one. So next up, we have the Hawthorn Hawks and GWS Giants, which will be happening, just before the kickoff of the main game of Brisbane Lions and Geelong. And man, this looks like it could be the game of the round. This, GWS had a bye last week, but Hawks, if they start the season 4-0, man, the lid is coming off. All bets are off, mate. That is, I think, more than what even they would have thought they'd be at this time of the season. What do you think?
Yeah, I think that's a fair statement. Well, the fact that I remember seeing a graphic on, I think it might have been the Channel 7 broadcast, but they flashed the last time, or every time the Hawks have won their first 3 games of the season, they've either won the premiership, finished runners-up, or made it to a prelim.
Okay, so good signs.
All of the previous times they won their first 3 games of the season. So if you're a Hawks historian, that bodes very well.
Yeah, it's going to be a great game, and that is actually happening in at UTAS Stadium, University of Tasmania, up in Launceston. So, their secondary, home sort of ground. This is going to be an interesting game, but I'll backtrack that. It's happening at the same time as the Lions game. Sorry, I'd read the time wrong. So it's actually happening at the exact same time as the Lions game, we play Geelong at the Gabba. The makeup, obviously, of the Alfred game, I'm just going to call it, the Cyclone Alfred washout. man, this is going to be a hell of a game. What are your predictions for it?
I don't know. I always predicted that the Cats were going to win. But after losing to St Kilda, there might be a chink in the armor that we can expose. So I really don't know. I still think the Cats will win, but I don't know. I just don't know.
I just think this is a game that the Lions will I think they'll just get up for it. You know, like it's one of those games where they're just like, all right, that's it. We've had a bit of a slow start. Let's just kick it into gear. Saturday night, you know, it's their first night game of the year. Prime time, Saturday night, Lions under lights at the G. Man, it's going to be great. Excited for that one. So that is going to be... Let's hope there's no rain around or anything, or any sort of weather elements to ruin it, because I know we had that last year where we played the Cats and it was rainy and it was a terrible game. So that is a very exciting game for us Saturday night. The next two games, which are the other two games of the round, again, Collingwood and Sydney are on a bye this week. So Adelaide is playing North Melbourne, which, I mean, looks like a great game at this point. Adelaide Oval... Crows in the sunshine, Kangaroos, though, coming off a great win. I think that's going to be a very, very exciting game. Who do you think?
The Crows need to make another statement
win this?
here.
Crows,
they've got to win this comfortably.
And if North win it, I mean, the lids are off. I feel like that's a very
based
exciting.
on how well Adelaide have started this season. If the Kangaroos were to win this, that would be a big, big headline.
Yeah, big lids off game. And then lastly, as we spoke about before, we have West Coast and Freo playing in the Western Derby. So I think this is going to be a Freo comfortable win. I just think it kind of has to be. If it's going to be any sort of good season for Freo, you got to be beating West Coast. I know that these teams don't like each other, and obviously they play in the same city and same stadium. But I think if you're legit, you got to be beating these teams like West Coast. So, which is... You know, it's an indicative of where West Coast are right now, that you should be beating those sort of teams, and it's probably where they hope they weren't at this point in their rebuild, but it's just the reality. So I think that Freo get this one. What do you think?
Yeah, no, I agree. The Dockers should win this comfortably.
Yeah. It's good to have football back. It has been a very big week for us. It's all cylinders going here in Queensland for sport. You've got the rugby league, you've got you still got the Raw, you still got the soccer going on. You know what, actually last night was the last game of the Bullets, sorry, not the Bullets, the NBL. So can you imagine if the Bullets were really good and they made the final? You could still have that sport going on in Brisbane.
Basketball,
You could have basketball, soccer, rugby league, union and AFL all happening concurrently around the stadiums of Queensland. So, I mean, you could have your plethora pick of sports throughout Queensland, and if you love sport, this is your time. Yeah, it's crazy how long that NBL season actually is, isn't it? And the A-League season as well. It feels so long. But do you think it's just because it spans that kind of busy period of Christmas and New Year's?
I don't know. I've not really thought about it, to be honest. It's an interesting fact that you brought up, the fact that there's that much sport going on in the one place at this time of year. But I don't know. I think the AFL and the NRL grab so much of the Australian attention during this footy season. So the fact that we can have cricket and basketball and the A-League, you know, get somewhat attention during the off season, I think is important for those sports. But they've still got a long way to go until they start competing for the national attention with those two other sports.
Well, for context, the last Bullets game was the last week of January. It's been nearly 2 whole months of no basketball, but the season only just finished. That just kind of shows how long the finals or the postseason is. So, the A-League's been going since September, and it's still got another month and a half to go. You know, so
you definitely want to see the Raw going deep into finals.
You definitely will not be seeing the Raw going to any finals. I can guarantee you that. They are rooted pretty hard to the bottom of the table, which is unfortunate for them, but hey, it is what it is. So we've got a big game coming up this week against Geelong. So we're all excited for the Lions, and you know, it's great to see the Cup. It's great to see kind of some of the legends coming out. I just think that we can finally realize that what we accomplished was something incredibly awesome. And I don't know, it's just great to see the cup there. It's great to see the flag, all that sort of thing. And we can kind of, I suppose, move on, but not forget. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah.
There are so many teams in this competition that have had to go many, many decades without having their club win a premiership.
Yeah.
So the fact that the Lions have done it within our lifetime, it's something to cherish.
Well,
that's for sure.
You look at the Saints. I just think of the Saints when they haven't won since 1966, and then they made to technically 3 grand finals. 2, but one was drawn, and then they played a replay against Collingwood. But man, they were like this close both times. Like, they were so close, and now they've just not been able to sniff it anywhere since then. So, man, you look at even Freo made a grand final, Adelaide made a grand final, and they just haven't been anywhere close since then. So it's one of those, you're not always guaranteed. Like, the Lions made the grand final 2 years ago and lost. No guarantee you're going to get back. You know what I mean?
100% true. But again, this is the sign of how well run your club is. Is are you able to sustain success over a long period of time and always be competing towards the top of the table and running deep into finals and earning the respect of the competition? Or are you going to be one of those teams that has just a moment in time? And we've seen plenty of that, that's for sure.
Yeah. Well, thank you everyone for joining us for round 2, which is the 3rd round of AFL for this year. Make sense of that. This is going to be an epic season, as we've already talked about. This is going to be ups and downs. There's going to be teams dropping off left and right, but we're going to see some more great games next week. Thank you so much for joining us for our wrap-ups of this week. Any final thoughts for you, Caleb?
No, just keen for next week.
Keen for next week. This is going to be an exciting week. So thank you so much to everybody for watching. Please subscribe to the channel if you want to see some weekly reviews and previews of the next week. So thank you so much to everybody. You have a good day.